All right, folks, I want to welcome our guest to the show. It is Travis from Florida. Welcome to the show, man.
Howdy.
Appreciate you being here. So I know you've got some
Absolutely.
stories to tell us, right? So let's get right into it. Let's talk a little bit about the paranormal stuff. I know you've had some UFO experiences. So why don't you just take us back to where you were doing and what happened to you, man?
Yeah. You can hear me okay, right? Good. Okay. Yeah, like I said, reached out to you. I've had definitely, I would say, try to remember if it was 7 or 8, but definitely around 7 UFO. Uh, four of them, four of those times, no doubt about it. And those 4 times, I actually had another person with me, which it's kind of good because, you tell somebody something, they're like, yeah, okay. Obviously, we've all been there. Yeah, okay. You're like, that guy's crazy. But when you have a witness, it's a lot easier to tell the story. And, I tell them passionately. And I think, like, you've talked to people when they say stuff and, like, you can kind of get a reading on them or a vibe. Like, there might be something to this. I've never seen one or whatever, but, it's always good to have a witness. But I'll kind of go, I guess, a little chronologically. Um, I'd say the first time I remember I was in elementary school, and I remember going to it. We were at a friend's house. My mom, I'm a kid, we're impatient, all that. But I remember sitting. She's like, "Just sit here, stay in the car." And she goes, "I'm gonna run inside to grab something." So, I don't know where my mind was, but I'm sitting in the car, and I remember the people's house that we were at, they had, there was a lot of foliage, a lot of trees, bushes, and all that. But it, like, I'm gonna try to paint a picture. I remember, like, just sitting there in the chair, in the seat, and kind of like just daydreaming. But there was like a big gap where I could see the blue sky. It was probably around 5 in the afternoon, I guess. The sun was kind of going down and all that. But and I just remember seeing like this. It wasn't big, but I'd say it was probably about 40, maybe 50 yards off the ground. But I caught it, and I saw it fly through these trees of that open space that I could see. And it caught my attention. I saw it for a second, and it was just like, what the hell was that? You know, I know asteroids and meteorites break up. They call it. You just kind of see a streak or something like that. For whatever reason, like, I've always just been into stuff like that and paid attention. Always been looking in the sky since I can remember. But that was the first time, and I wasn't thinking UFO, but I still have a clear and vivid, just that photo of that thing, that just flying through it, like. So I kind of dismissed that, but now the second time I saw a UFO, and like there's kind of a little bit of a story, but this is the one where I had someone with me, and it was just no doubt about it. So I remember I was with my best friend at the time. His name was Tim, and still good friends to this day. But he lives in another state. Still keep in touch. Still good buddies. And I remember we were in middle school. I want to say either 7th or 8th grade. I'm not too sure. Somewhere around there. This is like I want to say mid '80s. And I remember we had went to to this girl's house, and you're in middle school, you're getting into girls and all that. And to this day I cannot remember this girl's name, but there were 2 girls there. Me and my buddy were there. We're just there being kids and teenagers, just trying to, hey man, trying to get the first bait, whatever, you know what I mean. But she's like, hey, listen, dead serious. She's like, listen, my parents will be home soon, and if they come home, go out the back door, go around the front. When they come in, we'll meet you out front. The old switcheroo. So, sure enough, her parents come home, and like we go out the back door, and like I don't know what her dad did, but he may have been a golf teacher, instructor, something. But they had these huge whispering pines in their backyard, and I remember there was a huge net. Obviously he's hitting golf balls, and what I tell you, I like there had to be at least 1,000 golf balls on the backyard. And I grew up playing sports. I pitched. baseball, football. I pitched all the way up through college. I had really good arm. So I don't know why, but I take like 4 or 5 of these golf balls. So parents come in, we go out to the front, and I put them in my pocket. So, we're out there waiting for the girls, and, it's about 8:30, getting close to 9. And like, they're still not coming out, they're still inside talking with the parents. And so I start taking these golf balls. I throw one in the air as high as I could throw it. You can't see a golf ball in the dark. And then, we're coming down, we're covering our heads, and they're boom, bouncing in the street. So I take another one and I go to throw it up, and like, I completely stop. And you ever see like an airplane flying? You see it go behind the cloud, and then you'll see it come out the other side. So I go to throw this golf ball, and like, I directly above us, not to the left, not to the right, directly above us. I'd probably, probably a couple thousand feet. I see, like, when I tell you we were directly underneath this, it was a silver. I remember, I didn't see the top of it. Obviously, we're underneath it. It was a silver disc. Kind of, I'd say it was being covered by this. It was a little cloud, but it was thick. You couldn't see through the cloud. And I go to throw this golf ball, and I'm like, Tim, look up. And we see this UFO. It's directly above us. And he sees it, and he's like, what the fuck is that? And it was almost like the eerie part about this. It was almost, we saw it for about 3 to 4 seconds. It was almost like it knew that we saw it, because that cloud was being pushed by the wind. I don't know if it was kind of like using the cloud as cover or what. And I saw that one. I don't know the pilot's name, the one on the Nimitz. The Tic Tac video. They said they tracked it in speeds of like thousands of miles per hour. Like, I've seen that video, and you kind of see this. It was, like I said, it was almost like it knew we saw it. And I remember I didn't see any lights on the bottom, but around the UFO there was like a bluish like light spinning around it, but like super fast. And it kind of like geared up, and it just went poof. Like, people say they see UFOs, they just vanish, they just disappear. You could see this one like kind of gear up and just poof. It went the same direction as that cloud. But I mean, when I tell you this thing it's the fastest thing till this day that I've ever seen in my life. Like, it was just, and we both saw it. And it's funny because, every time we see each other or reconnect, like, we always bring that story up. And it was just like, we didn't even wait for the girls. We hopped on our bikes, and he lived a couple miles away, and like, we were terrified. And I remember we just took off and rode as fast as we could to his house. Like I said, a couple miles away. Like, we're looking in the sky. We don't know what's happening, man. But it scared the shit out of us. And like, that was probably like my most, I would say, of my experiences, probably the most prolific, because like, it was UFO, no doubt about it. And like I said, I was probably mid 80s. I don't know, somewhere, like I said, I was in middle school, but that's the one where, like your typical saucer, you get a lot of people describe, but the speed, I just remember when this thing shot off, like, it didn't disappear. You kind of see it like kind of perk back and just poof, gone. Like, we would have seen it come out the other side of the cloud. But it was just, man, like I said, I've still to this day, I've never seen anything that fast in my life, ever. And
well, I know you listen to the show, so I've shared my experience that I had when I was 16 with my mom a couple of times on the show. So I won't get into the details, but it was almost the exact opposite of what you had, right? It wasn't the typical saucer shape. It was a different sort of shape. And this thing was large and metallic. There was zero lights. And it was going extremely slow and just disappeared, back behind this ridge. And I've heard other experiences where people have had that really fast acceleration, disappearance kind of thing, or they just blink out of existence altogether. I've talked to people like Glenn from Kentucky who's had those. I mean, he sends me videos almost daily of this UFO that he goes out and films that's hovering around over his property. And I want to go back to your first encounter first experience with a UFO, if we could. How big? You said this thing was maybe like 50 yards off the ground. How big and what shape was that first UFO you saw?
Yeah, like it wasn't really big. I remember it was probably about 40, 50 yards off the ground, and I would say it was probably a couple hundred yards away from me. And what, like I said, it was going from left to right, and it was flying. I saw it in that V shape of sky that I could see through the foliage. But if I could give a rough, like if you took a car the length and you like made it like turn it upside, sideways up, it looked like a car, but like a little bit thicker. It wasn't circular. It was kind of like I guess like a perpendicular, maybe. Is that the right word? Something like that. I kind of the shape. And it wasn't big at all. Not at all. Probably like the size, maybe like the size of a car, you know. But it was so fast. Like like I said, I didn't know if it was like a piece of a meteorite or something coming in flying, or no clue. It was that, and that was so fast too. I remember, you kind of, when you see something like that, you're like, you gotta like take a step back. You're like, all right, like, well, there's nothing that, I've never seen anything quite like that. Like no airplane, wasn't a bird, So, I guess that's really kind of only thing I could think of, to how to explain that.
I did a show last year, and I can't. I apologize. The guy's name is escaping me now, but it was a 21st century paranormal something, I think, is the guy's page that he has, and it was all about these spheres. It was almost like the Betz sphere, if you've heard that story. This perfectly round ball that was found back in the day, and it moved on its own, and it was very mysterious, very interesting story. This guy's theory, and he actually says he has two of these things. He's in possession of two of these, what he calls spheres. And I was asking about the size and the shape because it being so slow or so close to the ground and so close to you, we had this entire conversation about these spheres. And he has this, well, he goes beyond it being a theory. He says, he knows that these things are basically unmanned craft that the motherships or these bigger entities, these ships send down as sort of satellites. So I was curious if it was something similar to that, but it doesn't sound like it at all because these things are
Yeah,
not very big.
they send them up, maybe kind of do a little recon or something like that. What's interesting is the area that I'm in. This home. We have a couple of big lakes that feed into the intracoastal, and then there's the Atlantic Ocean. But this one was off of the South Lake, and I have my next story or my next encounter will be on the North Lake. They're probably about a half a mile apart from each other. But that first sighting I had, that was they lived on that South Lake. I don't know. I've seen videos. These things going underneath the water, coming back up out of the water. I think they may use, especially oceans. I mean, how much of the ocean has really been discovered? What do they say? Like about 5% of it. I don't know. So
Yeah, we know more about space than we do our own oceans. Before we move on to the third one, let's talk a little bit about the size of the saucer that you saw in the second one. Could you estimate how big this thing was?
yeah, like I said, it was directly above us. It wasn't up and to the left. Like I said before, it wasn't to the right. It wasn't to the east or west. It was directly above us. And if it were to come down, we saw it clearly. So I would say, and if it was on the ground, I would say maybe about, and like I said, it was a perfect circle. I would probably say probably 100 foot, all the way around, for as high as it was, for us to see it as clear and make it out what it was. Like I said, it was probably a few thousand feet up. I don't even think it was a mile. Like I said, I'm judging the best as I can. That was 30 years ago, but
Yeah, even if it happened yesterday, it's hard to judge something in the sky when it's that far away from you. So I get that. What about your next experience with them?
Well, this was 94. I remember the year actually at the time, and this is on the North Lake. Remember my first one sighting was on the South Lake. This was my I was with my girlfriend at the time, who, well, now my ex-wife, but I remember she still lived with her parents. We were probably in our, I was what, shit, 94, it would have been 21, 22, around there. I remember we went to see The Lion King, and we had just gone back to her house. She was still living with her parents, and we parked the car. Her parents had like a little divot on the front of the street. Now, we didn't park in the parking lot. We kind of hedged up along the street there, and we're walking up to her house. And I remember I forgot something in the car, but we were walking together. She walked back with me, and I would say about the length of a block. She lived closer to that lake. She probably lived about a quarter of a block from the North Lake. Remember, I saw my first sighting on the South Lake. This is the North Lake. Her parents lived, and she lived about 2 houses to the end of the block. So we got some in the car, walked back to the car, and for whatever reason, I don't know why, but we're both looking at the far end of the block, and at the far end, I would say the size of this thing, if you took about, I would say 3 or 4, maybe 5 basketballs, and you stuck them all together to make one ball, you figure you got a 3 or 4 foot ball there. But we saw this thing coming down the middle of the street. It looked like my best description, it looked like a giant light bulb about the size of a couple basketballs stuck together. So we see this thing, by the time we see it, it's by us, hits the corner, and we lost it. And it was about 6 feet off the ground, flying right down the middle of the street. And I remember I looked at my wife, and she was like, "What the fuck was that?" And I'm like, "You saw that?" I'm like, "I'm not crazy. What the hell was that?" And like I said, my best description is like a giant light bulb. It was lit up. It was bright white. I remember it coming down the street. It's kind of going like back and forth. And I remember when it made that right-hand turn to go in the direction of kind of like that North Lake. It was going, I remember it made this big wide turn. It was like, and then it was just gone. And, that was freaky, to say the least. But that was another time where I had a witness with me, and my ex-wife now, but we were dating at the time, and that was pretty wild.
What was your next experience?
Let's see. I need to bring it down here. Trying to think here. Yeah, my next one. I was at my friend's house. I'd stopped by. He owed me a few bucks. I forget, but I remember I went to his house, and he lives out west, and we live by kind of like a major airport down here, and so when you're out west, you can kind of see the planes coming in, as they start lowering their descent, as they're coming to land. So we're outside, bullshitting and stuff, and I'm looking, and like I know planes fly by all the time, and I'm like, Joe, what is that? And like we see this, it kind of looked just like it kept changing colors from like a very like a bright orange to like a yellowish, and it wasn't a plane. It looked like a giant flame, but it was just going in the air, slow, changing colors, slow, kept changing these colors, and it kept getting smaller and smaller. And now, he's kind of like, he's a liberal, you know what I mean? So I just can't really, anyways, that's an inside joke with him. But, so this thing goes, and he's like, we're like just what the fuck is that? And it's going from west to east, and we're looking south. So now this thing starts to turn and go south, and it's getting smaller, smaller, and it just disappears. Like, and like from where I would say it was probably about I'd say about a mile from us. We could, like I said, you could make out a plane if it was a plane, easily from where he is. Like I said, I explained, you see the plane start their descent, to the airport from there. And this, like I said, I don't, it just looked like a giant, like a flame, like a big flame, but it kept changing those colors, like that orangish, yellowish, orange, yellowish, and it kept getting smaller. And it just, like that one, it just vanished. There were no clouds out. That one I could still see to this day, like in that photograph, like just a clear picture of this thing, man. And it didn't, I even had it, he was scratching his head like, I have no idea. He almost went inside to get his wife to like come outside and make it like we weren't crazy or something, but it just vanished. Just, yeah. And I don't, like I said, man, who knows? I don't know what that was.
It's interesting that you've had, I mean, that you've gone through 4 encounters with these things, and every single one of them is different. That's one of the conversations I had with President recently, is the different types and the different shapes and the different size ships and things that people are seeing, and how it seems to be, it's almost like a trend. It was the saucers back in the early 60s, 50s, 60s, 70s. And then it moved into, now we're into this, it seems like this triangle, this floating triangle thing that's going on in places like Kentucky and other places. Yeah. And it's just interesting.
I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry. Have you ever seen the film? I think it's direct footage from like either 52 or 56 with the pyramid shaped UFOs above the White House. Have you ever seen that video?
Yes.
Okay.
Is that, you're talking about the incident where they actually fired on these things in California and they made their way out?
Yeah, no, that was the Battle of Los Angeles, if I'm correct. This one, if you can look it up, just type in UFO over White House. Like it was either 1952, 54, or 56. It was one of those years. I didn't mean to cut you off there. Sorry. But they, like, if you look it up, you'll find it. You'll see it.
I've probably seen it, but I'll definitely check it out for sure.
Yeah, like pyramid shaped UFOs right over the White House.
It's crazy to have these different shapes and sizes and different experiences over so many decades. But what was your next experience with these things?
Yeah, let me see what okay. So I'm a courier. I deliver for a big delivery company. It's Brown, if that'll give you a clue. So this one I had my route at the time. I would have to take a couple interstates to get out west and to get to my route. And when I'm done with my route, I would obviously have to get back on the interstate and go back to the center, drop the truck off. So when you're on this interstate, when you're heading back to the center, to the right or the east, are all homes, businesses, suburbia, whatever you want to call it. But directly to my left are the Everglades. That's all that's there, the Everglades. And so this one night, I remember I get back on the interstate, and I remember it was almost dark. It was still light enough out to where you could see the color. It was really rainy, really cloudy, and what I remember about this night was really windy. And driving in a big courier truck, if you're on the interstate, man, and you get a nice gust of wind, man, your trucks will wobble, like to the point like where you got to slow down. It'll scare you. But so anyways, I'm driving north, and it's getting dark. So I remember so I'm looking straight at, and I would definitely probably say 6, 7 miles to just kind of give an estimate. I saw this bright white light, and I would say from the distance I was at, it might have been maybe, I don't know, maybe half a mile off the ground as far as it was. But I could see a bright white light. And like I said, it was super cloudy, rainy, and windy. And I know in that direction, I know there's no planes, anything. There's nothing like that where that light should be, but now I'm on the interstate, and I got to pay attention to what the fuck I'm doing, because I'm driving a truck. And so I'm driving, checking my mirrors, and, I look back up, it's rain, and I'm trying to find it, and I look, and it's gone. And, I'm thinking, I'm like, what the fuck? Like, was that like, something like low, like would be typical, like the height of like a helicopter would be, not too high up and not too low, like kind of just that, that center above ground, if you will. So, I lose track of it. I think, to me, I think like it might have been, I don't know what it was, but maybe the clouds were blowing, it's behind a cloud or something. So it's gone. So on this interstate, I got to keep going north, and then I got to make this right. And then I got to go from north to south. I got to go from west to east. So now I go up and I make this turn. So now I'm going east. And, I'm still kind of like, like I said, I told you before, ever, since I've been a kid, I just, for whatever reason, I don't know, I've always looked into the skies and still, it just always fascinated me. So I look to my left, boom, I see this thing again, but it's closer, but still not close enough to where like I can make out what it is or anything like that. It's still a few miles away, but I see it. I'm like, damn, what, like, and I'm looking, I'm driving, I'm like, the way wipers are going, I'm looking, and I'm trying to, I'm like, man, should I get my phone out? I'm like, no, don't do that. So, and like I said, it was really windy. So now it clicks. I'm like, man, it is way too windy. There's no way that a helicopter would be out in this weather. There's no way. Like, there's no way. It's not a helicopter. I'm looking, I still, boom, and like it just disappears again. So, now I'm like, man, just fuck it. Just get back to the building, man, and go home. So I'm driving. I say I probably go about, probably about another 2 miles, maybe 2.5 miles. I'm driving, and, I'm just, you're driving back, you got longer, you're just daydreaming. Like, you can't wait to get, when you're getting close to getting off work, how you get that edgy, like, come on, just like, let's go. Brian, I look to my left, and about 100 yards away, about 100 yards off the ground, I see this giant white ball of light. And I see it, clear as day. And I'm looking, now I'm like, I'm getting my fucking phone out. Nobody's going to believe this. And I go and I see it, and it goes and just disappears right in front of my eyes. Like, that one I saw, it like disappeared. Didn't shoot off or anything. Just got smaller and just like poof. Saw it. That's all we're going to show you. I saw it 3 times. Each time it got closer, and the last time I saw it, poof, and it just vanished. Like I said, it got smaller and just vanished. Poof, just like that. Big, like just a big ball of light. I could see through it. What's fun? It's funny, you tell stories and, like, things come back to you when you're telling. But I remember there was it was like one of those big giant, like radio antennas, the ones that go, like way, way, way up, and a few hundred yards up, man. This thing was way, but I remember I could see through the light. I could see the antenna, and but I'm going, and it just vanished, poof, just like that, gone. And that was it. Like, I'm like, you drive around, I'm like, I know some of these other cars had to fucking see that, it's just, oh man, I don't know. That was pretty, man, it's funny because I've told that story, but I just remember now that I could see that antenna through the light, and I'd always forgotten that part of that story just until now, just till I told it again.
Well, you've had a couple of experiences. I've got some questions. Let's get through the last couple of sightings, and then I'll get into some of my questions.
let's see. And there was, like I said, the other times, I'm just trying, but there was a time with my oldest daughter. I remember we were at this is probably, I'd say this was around kind of like when drones were kind of getting, I don't know, you want to say maybe like a 8, 9, 10 year kind of drones were, I give it that kind of time frame. But I remember arguing with my daughter. She's like, Dad, she's into all that stuff too. And she's like, Dad, we watched the Ghost Adventures and Ghost Hunter, where she loves all that stuff. Same with me. And so she's like, Dad, I see a UFO. I'm like, we were at a party. I forget what it was for, but I remember being at a party. It was outdoors and stuff. And so she's like, come here, hurry up. And so I go outside with her, and like this thing is still there, sitting in the sky, and it wasn't big. It was, all you could see was the light. And she's like, Dad, that's a UFO. And I'm like, I don't know. And then like it kind of like starts bobbing, and then it just, like I said, I was like, no, that's a drone. There's no way. She's like, Dad, no way. Boom. And then as soon as we had that discussion about the drone, this thing just goes, like, I don't want to smack. It just went like shot straight down and disappeared behind the, like, kind of off in the distance, like this, I guess what, like a tree line type of scenery or area that we were at. And I remember looking at her, and I was like, you know what? I don't think that was a drone. And, that was, I credit her with that one and seeing that one. But, for the amount of time we saw it and for what it did, and just at the speed, it wasn't as fast as that first one I told you that shot off, but this one, it just went straight down. It was kind of almost like it knew we saw it, again, almost. And she's like, I'm ready. She like punched me in the arm. She's like, I told you. And I was like, all right. I guess I'm not the only one that sees these things. So, and I remember sitting on my porch. Like I said, I told you we're kind of we're near a major airport down here. And I remember sitting on my porch one night, and it all depends on the weather of kind of which way the planes come in or take off. They try to avoid the weather so they can, obviously climb up above the clouds and all that. And I remember this one night, I was outside like smoking a cigarette or something, and I remember I thought, I remember it was really windy also this night, and I was sitting on my front porch, and I kept seeing this thing, this white, giant light, white, right above the housetops. And I thought it was a plane taking off, so whatever. I'm just, dicking around on my phone or whatnot. And I'm looking back, and like, it's still there. And I'm like, man, it's from the distance that it was to where I could see it. There's no way it could have been a helicopter. It was just, I wouldn't have been able to see it. It was like probably as big as like a jet, like a big plane. From the distance that I was seeing it, kind of like on my front porch, and it was just stagnant, just like sitting there. But it was drifting kind of, I had an old phone, and I actually recorded it, but I wish I don't have that recording anymore. I've since got a new phone and all that, just kind of wiped, any of that stuff out. But that's kind of like, it's, what I can think of. I know there's another one, man. I was trying to do I know I had another story. I just can't. Oh man. But for the most part, and I have had a paranormal experience. I don't have many of those, but I did live in North Carolina for 4 years, and then we had moved back to South Florida. But I'll tell you that after, if you want to hear it.
Well, yeah, let's go back to you mentioned it a couple of times during a couple of the experiences that you had with these things, that you felt like they may be aware of you. So that begs a couple of questions. First and foremost, let's address that one straightforward. Outside of, was it just the maneuvers that they took that made you feel like these things were aware that you had seen them? And I guess the second part of that question is sort of goes to, what do you think these things are? Do you think they are unmanned drones? Do you think they're something that has to do with extraterrestrials? Do you think the majority of the things that you've seen have been extraterrestrial craft in some shape, form, or fashion?
I tell you what, I know, I'm sure you've heard this before. Hey, finally, by the time the public sees certain things, government's known about some of these things for 20, 30 years before, that was another thing I told you when I was throwing the golf balls. I meant that I didn't include, but something, there was no noise. There was no engine, no nothing, something that takes off, it's kind of going to leave like a sonic boom or something like that. There was nothing. Just, have you ever heard a Tesla car as quiet as they are? You know what I'm
Oh
talking
yeah, when
about?
they first came out, I was still a cop and I almost got hit by a couple of them directing traffic because you can't hear them.
Yeah.
They're on you before you
Yeah.
know it.
Yeah. This thing was quieter than those. Like you couldn't even hear it. That's another thing too. I forgot to say. I do believe, the Roswell weather balloon. I think that was a bunch of bullshit that they fed the public. I do believe in reverse engineering. I don't think they give us as much credit as they think. That, a lot of us out here, that we deserve. We're not as stupid as they think we are. And I do believe, like I said, that one UFO that I saw. Listen, if there was a human being in there, the speed at which that thing took off, the G force would have absolutely incinerated any kind of person. You know what I mean? There's no way. Like the G force would have killed a human being. So I don't know. Is there like a little bubble inside these things that protect them? Who knows? I don't know. I do believe in alien life. I haven't seen an alien, but some of the things that I've seen are, you know, aren't taught in schools. And if you come out and talk about it, like I said, you're either made labeled crazy or this or that, which is why I'm glad I had a witness on a couple of those occasions. So, I can verify, and it's crazy, man. This world has a lot of mysteries unsolved, hopefully we'll get some disclosure someday. Hopefully.
Yeah, I actually wrote down disclosure with a question mark. And that's one of the things that I've had conversations recently with Preston Dennett and other people about on the show is some of the things that are coming down the pipe and some of the disclosure that has happened. I think the government knows a lot more about these things than they let on. And they've probably known that for a long time. But I guess that's the other question I had for you. And this is something that I've sort of evolved over the years. I used to think that these things were coming from billions of light years away. And I've sort of morphed my opinions on that. If they are alien intelligence and these craft are being guided or piloted by sentient beings from other places, I guess that's my question for you. And it's completely subjective. Nobody has any freaking clue, including you or I. But what do you feel about these things? Do you think that they're already here? Do you think it's some sort of interdimensional ability that allows them to come in and out of dimensions? Or do you still have that belief that they're coming from billions of light years away? Where are you on all of that?
Yeah. I tell you what, at the speed at which I saw that one thing, getting from closer planets or something like that, I could see how they could get here in like a shorter time than, like light speed or however fast they travel. It's funny. I actually live in the Bermuda Triangle. Like I'm at, like where we're at is like I'm actually in it. I forget what show it was, but oh man, what was that show? You were talking about some triangle, but you know how ships go missing or planes go missing and then they just show up, uh, you know, like they just took off from the airport yesterday, you know what I mean? Like in missing, what was it? The Manhattan Project and things like that. You know what I mean? But I believe, that I forget what show it was. I watched, I had watched this show, and there was this pilot, and he flew a little Cessna plane, and he was talking about how he took off, I think from the Bahamas, and he was flying back to Miami. I think he said it was usually, I think like a 40-minute, maybe a 45-minute flight or something like that. So he says that he takes off, um, and then he goes through some clouds, and like he took off, and like 5, 10 minutes, 10 minutes later, he's through these clouds, and then he comes out of the clouds, and he's in Miami, and he's only been in the air for like 5 or 10 minutes. So, and the guy explained he thinks like he might have hit like a wormhole or some kind of, who knows? I don't, like a portal, maybe something like that. Um, and how do you explain that? It was, I forget what show it was, but it was pretty interesting to hear that. Um, but we have all these pyramids around the earth, these, you know, civilizations that have just vanished off the earth, Incans, Mayans, whatever you want to call it. Like, and there's, what is it around like Machu Picchu or some of those places over there? They have all these, and like the pyramids also, like, how do you build those? But I think the one in Mexico, there's like these huge, patterns or designs that you could only see from the air. So how could they know, however long ago that was? I mean, what, thousand years, even longer? I don't know. Like, how could they know if there was they couldn't get into the air, but you could only see these things from the air? You know what I mean? There's, man, I don't know. It's a good question. There's just a lot of, I don't know. I guess is as good as yours.
Yeah, it's the
But
thing about this subject, man. It's almost like Bigfoot, the cryptid thing, the UFO thing. There's so many things to unpack, and every question leads to another question, and then you go down the rabbit hole, and we don't know. But that's why we do these shows. That's why I talk to people like you who've had experiences, because I'm looking for those same answers. You mentioned a paranormal experience earlier. Would you mind sharing that with us as well?
yeah, absolutely. Living in South Florida my whole life, I really haven't had any. Um, but when I lived in North Carolina, I don't know if it was the land, but we definitely had our fair share in this house that we lived in. And I always get chills telling this story, man. But I'd say, let's see, I was asleep. This was late Sunday night. Monday morning's the next morning. Got to go to work. Excuse me. And I remember waking up. It was about, I'd say roughly, probably like around 1:30, probably like 2 in the morning. And like since that night, like I, I I still haven't sat up in bed as fast as I did that night. Since that night, I still haven't done it. Like, I hopped right up, and what I was awoken by was what I felt like was a, a skinny male. He was a man, skinny man, standing at a dark figure standing at the front of my bed. And I remember I hopped up and I sat right up. And your eyes are adjusting to the darkness. You're trying to, like, you're looking around. I have young kids. My wife, she was sleeping, and I sit right up, and I'm like, wow, that was weird. And then all of a sudden, like, I have this and Brian, when I tell you overwhelming, just this overwhelming feeling of just ease and calmness, like, come over my body, and was like, it's okay, just go back to bed. So, I just didn't think of it. I went back to bed, and my wife called me at 10:30 in the morning. I was at work, and she's like, she goes, Rob was killed last night at about 1 o'clock in the morning. And he was my best friend. And I think it was him, coming to see me, coming to say goodbye. And man, it was a tough one. But, you know, like I said, man, I remember my wife called me. She was bawling hysterically and it turns out, he was black guy and he was skinny. He was tall. And that's what I felt like what I was woken up at, standing at the front of my bed. Like I said, I had that overwhelming feeling of ease and calmness come over me. It's like, hey, it's okay. Go back to bed. I think he was just coming to say goodbye.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I definitely appreciate. I know that was not easy. I appreciate you sharing that. But I've had many people have talked about those very similar things. And I guess the last question I'll ask you is one that I've asked a couple of people that have experienced not just paranormal stuff in general, but specifically the UFO stuff. As far as the UFO stuff is concerned, why do you think you have had so many experiences? I mean, we went through like 7 experiences where you got to see something that very few people honestly ever get to see. Have you ever had a thought about why it is that you've had so many experiences where others may go their entire life and never see anything like that?
Yeah, I think I do. I think I have a few. For one, like I told you a few times, I'm always looking in the sky. Like I've always been drawn. I always, oh man, some reason, man, I always almost feel like I don't belong here. Like just something that draws me. And, two, and I've always been like, I've never been, I don't want to say leader, but I've always kind of like blazed my own path. I don't follow the crowd. I'm always have been open-minded. And I'm always that one guy, hey, what if, hey, what if this, or what, that what if guy. And yeah, that would be cool, man. Shut up, man. What? Yeah, but what if, you never know, and like, that's just, if I could describe myself, that's how I would describe myself, because you never know. What if?
Yeah, it's a good answer, man. And again, nobody really knows, but that's one of the things I've asked people on the show before. And it's one of those things where I will never know, but I think, like you said, to your first point, if you're looking up, right? And I do the same thing. I've seen a couple of things here. I've had the one experience when I was 16, but I've had other experiences throughout my life. And it was literally because I'm always looking up. I sit out here and do bonfires. We have bonfires sit on our porch and just enjoy our 40 acres of property here in North Carolina. And I'm usually looking up, and I've seen some weird shit that I can't explain. And just driving along the road, instead of, if I'm in the passenger side and I'm not driving, I'm usually looking up. If it's a clear day, whatever, I'm looking around. People are like, "What are you looking for?" I'm just looking, And if you're not looking, you're not going to see anything, because I say it about Bigfoot, I say it about UFOs, but we live in a society where 99% of the people are always on their phone. Everybody's looking down at this tiny screen and scrolling through Facebook and Instagram and TikTok. And those people aren't the ones who are having these kind of encounters or these kind of experiences. It's people who do the opposite of that, who actually look up or go out into the woods and seek things out, and they see weird things that they can't explain. And I believe that has some to do with it. I think it also has a lot to do with the person you are. When I was talking to Preston Dennett the last time I had Preston on the show, and I've got him scheduled to come back, he mentioned Dolly, the subject of his latest book. I've got them scheduled for the next couple of weeks. I'm going to interview them. I think on the 8th or 9th of January, we're going to do the interview. Is that your phone ringing?
Yeah. Oh, you hear that? Sorry. Oh, these headphones are good. Sorry.
But I've got them. Oh, you're good. So I've got them scheduled to come on and talk about Dolly's experiences. But that's one of the things that Preston and I have talked about, is just people being in the right place at the right time. But he also believes that there is something deeper that goes on. And when I was talking to him the last time, I started telling him some of the experiences I'd had. I have deja vu a lot. I've had some psychic stuff.
Yep.
And as soon as I started mentioning those kind of things to Preston, he starts shaking his head like, yeah, you might have had more of an encounter with these things than you think, like possible abduction scenarios that you just don't remember. And I'm like, I don't even want to go down that path. But there is maybe some correlation. And he said, if you look back into the history of your family, I guarantee you will find other people in your family, whether they'll talk about it or not, maybe a different story, that have had encounters with these things, because it does go back into your DNA, literally the DNA from your past ancestors that have had experiences and encounters with these things. That's a whole nother ball of wax that we can maybe get into some other time. But it's also interesting to me because again, you have these experiences. It's the same thing with people with their Bigfoot encounters. Some people go their entire life and look for them for 50 years and never see one. And then I talk to people who claim that they've seen them 10 times. Maybe the truth lies somewhere there in the middle.
Yeah.
But if what they're telling me is accurate, there's got to be something more, in my opinion, to that than just coincidence, right? And I don't think it's coincidence, in my opinion. I don't think it's coincidence that you've had the experience you've had over the course of your life.
Yeah. Even my mom too. She had, she's told me a few experiences too that she had, but at the time she was one of them was in Arizona and the other one was in Colorado. You know what I meant to tell you? I don't know if you own a pair of night vision goggles or glasses or anything like that. Do you?
I don't.
Man, I tell you what, invest in a pair of those and just go out, sit in your backyard, preferably with the moon, like not around. But we went out to the Everglades, I'd say about a month ago. And, we had rented, two pairs of the night vision goggles, and we bought one of those, like the laser pointers, they shoot it looks like you could hit another universe. They shoot so high in the sky. Get a couple pairs, so if you see something, and I promise you, Brian, if you get some night vision goggles and you just look in the sky, make sure you have another pair if you're with somebody, and just you could point it out with the with the laser, and then that way they can see whatever it is you're looking at. I promise you will see something. We saw so many things, man. I didn't bring that up. I wasn't thinking about it, but that was about a month ago, man. I tell you, man, we saw stuff, and it wasn't lit up. It was just stuff going one direction, then going bound, not super speeds, just going back and forth. And we probably saw a couple satellites too, but man, it was pretty wild, pretty intense.
Yeah, I'm probably going to be on Amazon buying that shit tomorrow, because the last time I talked to Glenn out in Kentucky, and Glenn has these things over his property often, but that's one of the experiences that I think Glenn shared one of the times he was on the show, is he was going out with night vision goggles and looking, and there's a craft, literally this enormous craft that's hovering, maybe a mile or so out from his property, and you couldn't see it with your naked eye. He put the goggles up, he could see the craft, take them down, you can't see it. So I think there's got to be something to that too, man. Maybe some sort of, I don't know, cloaking is the right word, or whatever the case may be, but interesting stuff, man. Well, Travis, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your stories, man. I've had a blast talking to you.
Oh, man. Me too, Brian. Pleasure. And, like I said in the first email I wrote you, man, I appreciate what you're doing, man. And just giving people an outlet, because, otherwise people think we're crazy.